hear me? Thumbs up, please,
Yep.
if you can. Great. Perfect. So I'm going to do the opening, and apologies, I've had some technical issues. So once I've done it, I will hand over to Ant. But basically, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the past, present, and future of AI in PR and communications. And you'll be getting some valuable insights from Anthony Cousins, a top expert on the subject. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about his background. So Anthony is one of the most influential people in communications technology and was named in PR Week's Dashboard 25. He is also a member of the UK All-Parliamentary Party Group on AI, chair of the Association for Measurement and Evaluation of Communications, AMEC, Tech Hub, and of course, a fellow member of the CIPR Greater London Group Committee. So today's webinar is brought to you by the CIPR Greater London Group, a part of the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, which runs events, training, and accreditation for communications professionals. And as we know, International Women's Day is coming up, so I wanted to do a quick plug for our next event, which is called the Missing Women in PR and Communications, What's Next? It's an in-person event on the 5th of March from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll be sharing the findings of a new research study into nearly 4,000 female PR practitioners in England and Wales, which have left the industry mid-career or failed to advance in senior positions. So follow our LinkedIn page to find out more about the event, and you're very welcome to sign up. But without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Ant, who will talk about the past, present, and future, and the impact of AI on our daily lives. Thanks, Ant. Over to you.
Thank you, Christiana. Doing that without being able to hear stuff, that's kind of nerve-wracking. So thank you for that. I'll just grab the screen. Oh, is that coming through okay? Excellent. Cool. I'll leave you guys in the top right corner here. So I can see what I'd like. I apologize in advance. Like I booked a room to deliver this webinar and didn't realize the room would just have horror lighting. So apologies for that, but the screen is what we're here for. So past, present, the future of AI and comms. Firstly, why on earth should you bother listening to anything I say about AI in comms or anything like the subject? As Christiana said, so-called expert, it's becoming harder and harder, I think, to determine who is and is not an expert in AI. I think the only thing that has exploded nearly as fast as AI itself is the number of experts. So I will do what I can. And the context of doing what I can comes from the fact that I did start out in technology. So back in the 2000s, I started out as a full stack developer. I built databases, I built applications, I did kind of user research and design. And I did kind of technology roles for about 7 years before switching randomly into communications. So I joined the press office of the Ministry of Defense, and I cut my teeth in Iraq, Afghanistan, across the Middle East, deployed to those countries, offering on-the-ground media advice and media relationship advice. So I did kind of literally frontline comms roles, if you like. And I found a passion for communications. I did sort of on and off communications roles for another 7 years, including kind of stakeholder management during the Arab Spring. I worked in counterterrorism for a while, which is a kind of heavy community engagement, stakeholder engagement role. And then again, randomly in 2014, I moved into AI. I joined an AI startup where I was in charge of the product team, the engineering team, customer success. I was delivering it. I was helping people figure out how to adopt AI. Did that for a few years, ended up as chief of staff of that AI startup, then switched to another AI startup, then switched to another AI startup, a startup some of you may have heard of called FactMatter, where I was the CEO. And I sold that company to Cision a couple of years ago. And I stayed at Cision for a couple of years advising on AI strategy for that company. So I am both a communicator and a technology person. And I kind of at my core, I still consider myself a communicator. I do care about communications. I care about communicators. I care about the industry. So as much as anyone can be an expert in how AI will impact on PR or communications, I think I'm happy enough to say I'm as close as you can find to an expert in that particular niche of AI. There's a couple of questions I also want to get out up front, which are questions I always get asked at the end. We will have Q&A at the end, but these are questions I always get asked. What scares me about AI and what inspires me about AI? When I kind of do these up front. So what scares me about AI is not that we're going to have kind of robots coming and killing us all, right? With the Terminator and the red eyes and screaming. That isn't my fear at all. My fear about AI is actually unintended economic consequences that our markets are geared on kind of over time, gradual inflation. And I think actually we're going to have a period of sustained kind of slump or deflation over time because of the economic consequences of AI. We need to plan for that and engage around that topic a lot more than we have been. That's the actual thing that scares me about AI. And what inspires me about AI, and this is something that I think we have to address, like no one working in the field of AI gets up in the morning excited about the idea of putting people out of work. That isn't what we do it for, right? That's not a mission I could get behind. What inspires me and excites me about working in AI is that the result of it will be more people doing jobs that they should be doing, more human tasks, or work that humans were designed for. I think our jobs will become more satisfying, more fulfilling. We will be happier in the work that we do. That's what I build AI for. That's what excites me. So that introduction aside, and those kind of obvious questions answered, let's dive in. Past, present, future. The past of AI, because we've been using AI in this industry for a while, right? So why is it we're just talking about it now? The present, where are we at right now? And what trends can we look at that are happening right now, which might tell us something about the future? And the future, what is really driving this? How can we prepare? And I've kind of expanded a little bit of my normal chat here to talk specifically about how you as a new entrant, if you're just about to graduate, or if you've just graduated or in the early stages of your career, how do you prepare for AI and work with AI differently to someone who might have been in the industry already for 10, 20, 30 years? And then the final point, this is kind of another point of warning, the atrophy of human creativity, the most pretentious bullet on the slide. So that's what I'm going to be covering over the course of the time. That should give us maybe 15 or so minutes of Q&A at the end. I like leaving time for Q&A because I think that just makes it so much more real. So please be prepared with your questions, either that you've kind of seen as we go through this, or that you've kind of arrived on the conversation. Happy to take any question at all. Real test of an expert, right? So the past. So what I want to say about this kind of past, or this question that people have had, is like, this feels like a hype bubble, right? Is this just going to go away? Can I just stick my head in the sand and wait for it all to calm down? To answer that question, I would say, if I look back on the ability we had to build AI back in 2014, it was super difficult, right? Because the skills weren't readily available. And if you could find them, they were expensive. The open source kind of research and the ability to kind of learn from others wasn't really as abundant as it is now. The data sets were a lot harder to come by because we weren't stealing data back then. Automation was not existent. So you're spending kind of maybe a week or 2 weeks worth of work just to build some of the architecture, the pipelines and infrastructure that you can now build with a push of a button. The cost was significantly higher. The trust was significantly lower, believe it or not. And because of all these things, the investment wasn't there. It was really hard to come by investment. People didn't really believe that it was going to add value. That was my experience of it back in 2014. What I've seen over the course of the last 10 years, effectively, is that every single one of those problems has now been solved, right? So skills now much more abundant. Research is more abundant. Data sets, you can even use AI to create the data set to train AI, right? So the data sets are there. I'm not going to talk too much about kind of the approaches that some of the large language model providers have taken to get hold of the data to train their models. The automation is there. You've now got kind of, push of a button. The cost is significantly lower and continuing to fall. And the trust, believe it or not, is now significantly higher. At least I think people now trust that AI is capable of doing some interesting and valuable things. What they want to know is how best to integrate it, right? So the trust is significantly higher. And because of all these things, the investment is now through the roof. Look at the market cap of companies like NVIDIA. So the investment is there, the money is coming. And because of all of these anchors or these weights effectively being removed, the pace of the adoption and the release of AI is now hitting a kind of a hockey stick growth curve. You might look at it and we might have already had experience kind of elements of a bubble, but it is not the case that we're just kind of like over the course of the last 10 years, it's been steadily going up and now it's going to plateau. It's been steadily going up because each of these weights has been removed to the point where we've now got this rocket ship growth curve. So it's not going to go away. You cannot bury your head in the sand. And I say that with love and care for you as a communicator. If you've taken the approach as far as, oh, wait for it to calm down and then I'll figure out, what the lay of the land is. Sorry, you need to get on board. That is your only option. And I do say that with love and care. So is this going to go away? No, it is not. It's only going to get faster and it's only going to get bigger. But haven't we been using AI for years? What changed? Why now in this particular industry are we talking so much about it compared to how much we were talking about it in the past? And that's because the AI we were using in the past was a different kind of flavor. The AI was very simple and it could really only handle narrowly defined tasks. So think of things like sentiment analysis, right? Everyone on this call is familiar with sentiment analysis. Typically, a natural language processing algorithm that's been trained on a huge quantity of data to be capable of a very simple task and only that task. You can't ask a sentiment model to generate you some text for a social media post, right? It's only capable of that one specific thing. And even then, depending on the context or the usage, may even not be that accurate, right? This is AI operating as an assistant to a human. You want to do a task, there is a very specific model you can use to do that task potentially a little bit quicker than you could otherwise, right? That's what we've had in this industry since at least 2008, right? It's the earliest I could find examples of it. So we've had that for ages and no one cared, right? This didn't change dramatically the lay of the land or the industry. The reason why we're now talking about AI so much is because we now have AI capable of much more complex tasks, still sometimes with a single kind of output, it's an image or it's a text, etc. But much less specific direction required from a human to achieve something. So this is generate me a social post. I could literally, that's a terrible prompt, don't ever do that, generate me a social post. But I could, and I would get something. So the AI is now capable of inferring and suggesting and using its intuition to come up with its responses to the prompt. And that's something that really changed the game. That's AI effectively acting in like a co-pilot capacity right now. Now it's taking on tasks that a human otherwise would have given themselves. Like generating a social media post, for example, is actually a combination of a lot of smaller tasks, right? This is what we got effectively in 2023, really late, kind of November 2022, but effectively for most of us, 2023 is when we got this, and 2023 is probably when you first heard of the term AI Copilot. Now, this level of AI still has the potential effectively to change the world. We're still grappling with the implications and the potential of this level of AI, right? The kind of chat GPTs that you'd be using, the kind of Google Geminis, the Perplexities and the Claudes, whatever it is you're using, whatever your flavor is, that level of capability has the potential to change the world as we know it. We're still working on integrating it and scaling it and figuring out how to use it to its best capacity. But we didn't stop there. And this is the scarier part. We now have AI, which is capable of multiple complex tasks at the same time, providing mixed outputs. And the real difference here is that it is goal orientated. So not specific direction. You say, I want to achieve this. And the AI is capable of figuring out the tasks that are required to achieve that goal and then to do them for you and multiple of those tasks, right? So this isn't content generation, generate me a social post. This is plan a whole campaign for me, figure out the tasks required for that, and then go and do them, right? Look at these mentions, look at this reporting, tell me what I've missed, tell me what I don't know. That level of intuition, that kind of goal orientation, that is something that I've previously been referring to as AI autopilot, but we've now sort of termed as agentic AI. This is AI starting to use its own reasoning powers to figure out the tasks and to decide what to do about them, right? This is something that we are getting this year. This is coming. This effectively, this model, if you like, is the reason why we're talking so much about AI. It is not because of that base layer, right? Not because of that, the AI assistant. And it is even less so because of the Copilot layer, which started to peter off. People started to figure out the impact it was going to have. And agentic AI or agents, etc., may feel like another buzzword. It may feel like just part of the noise of AI, but effectively, it's as big a difference to the way we're going to be using AI as Copilot was to assistant. That's the level we're now hitting. And I'm sorry if you're following lots of people on LinkedIn who are following the news, there's a lot of noise and it's very hard to know what the real interesting terms are and the kind of the trends to follow. But agentic AI is one of those terms. So stick with me. The present, where are we right now with the use of AI? If I throw up here just a typical workflow, right? This is kind of a planning or a campaign planning workflow. You set your goals, you set your objectives, you do your audience analysis, you create your content, you distribute it, and then you kind of see how you did, right? You do measurement insights, and ideally you kind of go back to the start. Take it as read, that's, we could argue probably the detail of this or the flow. Take it as read, that's just a typical workflow that someone in this industry might be doing on a typical daily basis. Now, that workflow is at the bottom there, and I've laid that kind of like maturity curve on the left-hand side. So for each of those steps in that workflow, each of those parts of the process, there is a different level of AI kind of integration that we've established up until the year 2024, up until the end of last year. And that is my guess. This is, you know, not science. This is my experience, my own personal kind of view of where we've got to with each of the steps of that process in terms of AI. Goal setting, for example, completely manual. There is, for some reason, not really that much software out there that will help you identify and create good quality objectives like we should be doing, right? Best practice. If we're following it, we should be doing that first. Audience analysis is sort of assisted. Content creation, we now have kind of, actually people have, that's probably one of the first things people used AI for, was content creation. We have people out there right now getting quite good at using AI for content creation. So we're at that kind of co-pilot stage. Distribution is sort of assisted. You know, most of the media monitoring or social media listening tools out there will help you identify potential influencers or potential outlets, but they're not going to do it all for you. And measurement and insights, easily at the co-pilot level. We're now doing summarization, we're now doing intelligent and relevant insights, but we're still kind of acting on behalf of the human, telling us what insights we want. It's not totally goal orientated. Now, if that's where we are at the end of last year with the AI that we've managed to integrate into this industry thus far, here's where I think we'll be by the end of this year, right? This may look a little bit more scary. So if you look at content creation onwards, content creation, largely AI driven and AI created. Distribution, largely AI managed and controlled. Measurement and insights, 100% is going to be AI led. And I say that with confidence because I have in my head, and I've been working on products and designs to try and achieve that. I know it's coming. But you can also see there's a gap there, right? The upfront goal setting and a portion of the audience analysis, in my opinion, is still going to be largely human led. There is not, it's not a good idea, nor is it possible for AI to tell us what we want. That's still our job. So I have an acronym to describe that level of human interaction. I'm going to get into that in a second. But first, let's look again at that same sort of process. This is just a different lens on that same process, goal setting through to measurement and insights, where effectively right now, up until this year, every single one of those tasks was human led, right? If you didn't decide to do something, you didn't engage with the software or take the action, nothing would happen, right? Where we will be by the end of this year, with that AI autopilot or agentic workflow in place, is that effectively the only part of this process that will be human-led will be the goal setting. Tell me what you want. So if you can tell me what you want to achieve, I can then build a system to automate a large proportion of the rest of that workflow. I need to understand more about what you want, which means you, the human, spending more time explaining and articulating what it is you care about. And for the rest of that process, effectively, the human will move into more of a review, adjust, approve sort of relationship with the technology, right? It's not you going and navigating all around. It's effectively you responding to what the AI is providing to you. The way I would describe this, if there are any film fans on the call, the difference between the AI first and the human-led workflow is the same as the difference between a Hollywood blockbuster and the French independent cinema film, right? French independent cinema is hard going. You have to lean right in. You have to think about what you're doing. And in our industry, this is like, I'm navigating to this part of the product and remembering that I created that query and I've got that kind of categorization available to me. And I'm going to go and create a graph to try and visualize it. That's French independent cinema compared to what this will feel like, which is a Hollywood movie, which is like lean back, let it wash over you and just go, I don't like that. Can you change that? That's the feeling. And this isn't just our industry. This is how every single piece of software you interact with on a daily basis will feel like once we've achieved that fully agentic kind of feeling, which everyone is working on. So this isn't unique to our industry. This is what every software developer is working on right now. So that's the feeling. The benefit, obviously, from an AI perspective or the software provider perspective, is that for every one of those little interactions where you go, I don't like this or I do like this, you've got the ability for the AI to learn from interaction and get better over time. So that's another lens on that same view. So it's about who is leading on the action and who's doing most of the work. Now, what does that mean for us, right? That gap up front, the CASE acronym that I kind of suggested. Firstly, our job as a human is going to be to provide the system itself with a lot of the context it doesn't have. So the explicit knowledge that is beyond the cutoff date of where the model was trained, or that is hidden from it, right? Knowledge that's inside your business that you don't share with the world, but you will be able to kind of trust and share with the model if you want to achieve its goals. And codified tacit knowledge. So the things in your head, those nuggets of wisdom and experience, and maybe even those micro learning moments when you're in the office, if you happen to be in the office and you just, you're in the elevator and you hear the CEO talking, or you hear your colleague at the kitchen talking about something else. And those nuggets of wisdom and those strands that our human brain is excellent at pulling together into relevance, providing the system with those elements as well. Context, things the AI needs to know that it doesn't, that's a human task. This other one, the awareness, won't make so much sense right now, but it will want to run an agentic workflow that you're going to be working with multiple agents, multiple software agents doing multiple different things. They may or may not be fully aware of what each one of those other agents is doing and or what the humans are doing in their space. So making sure the systems are aware of who else is acting and what actions they are taking in the space is going to be a super important point. Strategy, right? This is really the core of it. What is it you actually want? And how do you measure that? And what goals does that break down into? It's being really articulate about what you want isn't something we tend to spend that much time doing, because we just leave it up here and we carry out the actions. We're going to need to get really good at taking this from here and providing it to the system so that it knows what it's trying to achieve. And empathy, right? An AI can only ever do its best interpretation of human emotions and empathy. I should stop there. Just make sure I've got like a bunch of chat. I want to make sure people can hear me at the end. Okay, good questions. Yes, keep questions coming. Yes, there'll be Q&As at the end. Thank you, Risha. So empathy. AI can only ever really do an interpretation of human emotion. So it will give you what it decides is a logical, sensible, at best of its knowledge, a legal output or suggestion of outcomes. But is it right? Is it ethical? Right? That's a human nuance. That's a human task. So in conjunction with the last point, the direction, it really is for the human to decide when to start, when to stop. Is it good enough? Do we start again, etc.? We, the humans, will still be responsible for what we put out into the world. Regardless of whether or not we use AI to do it, we are still responsible, which is why that empathy point is so important. Right now, the AI told me to do it is not a defense that you can use in court. So all of that CASE acronym kind of really amplifies what the human role in the use of software and kind of really everyday life will look like by the end of this year. One point to make, right, before we go and looking at trends that are happening right now, which I think are useful to look at to drive us into the future. And one is that all of this is context, right? All of this is information that we effectively need to provide the AI in order for it to do a good job. All of that is technically called context. It uses something called the context window of the models that we're using. So the first trend in AI I want to talk about is that context. And this is, I think, a lot more valuable, or it's a lot more meaningful than the noise you will have heard over the course of the last 2 years, which is every 2 weeks, oh, there's a new model coming out. Oh my God, it's beaten this last model. And you hear that constantly and people raving about these new models. It's all noise. The models we got at the end of November 2022 actually made the biggest difference in our capability. What we've had since then is incremental improvements in the capabilities of those models. But actually, the biggest difference we can make to the outputs we get from the AI is the quality of the prompts that we use, the direction we give it, right? Don't worry about the noise of those individual incremental capabilities of models where it's got a 1250 score, a 100 or a 1300 score. It doesn't make a difference, really. I'll take questions from people on that at the end. But here is someone clapping. Thank you. But here is a trend which I think is useful and relevant. So over the course of that same period of time, in November of 2022 with GPT 3.5, which is one of the models, really the model that went viral. The context window was so small that you could only really fit 30 social media posts in it, right? So if your task was review all these social media posts and come up with a post that is going to perform better than all these other posts, you can only give it 30 total. And you've maxed out your context window, let alone giving it direction and guidance and all those other things, okay? In Q4 of 2023, we had both kind of GPT-4 Turbo and Claude 2.1 start to raise that context window to the point where we now have thousands of social media posts, okay? So we've now got to the point of, hey, look at every social media post my company's released in the last 6 months, look at the engagement of those posts and give me a suggestion on how to improve my performance, typical task. That's where we got to at the end of Q4 2023. This, I believe, actually has now been surpassed. I need to update ever so slightly. At the end of Q2 24, we had Gemini 1.5 Pro with a massive context window. We're now talking millions of tokens, 150,000 social media posts, right? Think of all that content. That's every social media post this company's ever done, every response, and looking for trends, looking for analysis. That's the level of context we can now provide AI, far, far beyond what a human can possibly keep in their brain, okay? To make that make a bit more sense whilst making less sense, this diagram, which is intentionally almost too small for you to probably read, was an experiment done by a researcher who tried to fit all of the Harry Potter books into a single conversation with a single model, Gemini 1.5. And I think he fit 5.7 of all 7 Harry Potter books. So what you're seeing here is the AI's representation of every single character, event, faction, relationship, its ability to infer events that aren't mentioned but should have happened in order for the rest of the story to make sense. That's the level of conversation you can have now with a single model if you maximize that context window. Like, so take it's like, it's huge the amount of information we can now provide and get realistic results. Every single press release, every single journalistic article, right? That's where we're going to get to. So I think context as an increasing scale is one trend that's worthy of tracking, more so than an extra 10 points on some, math score from a model. I think that's a trend that is really worthwhile. Another trend right now, which actually scares me somewhat. So filter bubbles, right? Everyone on this call no doubt be familiar with filter bubbles. Time, we're all good. Filter bubbles have nothing on how we're going to be consuming content via AI, right? So the algorithms that determine your feed in those social media platforms or other kind of news consumption platforms created those kind of filter bubbles whereby you liked certain content, therefore you got kind of bundled in with a group of other people that like the content, and therefore you got content that reinforced your beliefs. We know the filter bubble problem, right? That is going to feel like a blunt instrument compared to the next two kind of generational leaps we're going to experience. The first being conversational search. So I don't know how many on the line have tried this. It was really good, and then it wasn't so good, depending on which model you're using. But the ability to ask a question and not receive, like in Google search history, like a list of links, which you can click on each one, read the page and go, oh, actually, that isn't what I want. And then you go back and you redo your search, you get a new list of links, you click through and you go, and then you have to read the whole article, only a third of which is actually relevant. Painful in comparison to ask a question, get the answer, which is the experience that we're now having through ChatGPT and through kind of Google's search summaries. The challenge with that is that effectively we've kind of removed the human process of reading the base content and coming up with the answers, and we've given that to the AI, which brings in a whole bunch of bias and concerns around how exactly, where exactly are they going for the answers, and how exactly are they doing the summarization? Because the problem in our society tends not to have been on black and white kind of binary truths, right? It's the subjective truth in the middle. So where is the bias of the AI models giving us these? And effectively, that's going to come down to the next one, personal AI agents. It's going to come from us, right? I am going to not be happy with the summaries and the results of my conversational search and my own little AI agents that I'll be playing with, Google of which has already released an example of this. I'm not going to be happy with that. I'm going to give it feedback. And through learning, it is going to be able to understand me to an nth degree more fidelity than our Google search or our social media feed algorithms have ever been able to do in the past. So that filter bubble is going to become increasingly fragmented, right? From polarized, or you kind of this kind of person to this kind of person, to segmentation. Okay, you're in one of these particular groups, to fragmentation, continually decreasing size of audience that are in this kind of nexus of all these different tribes and all these different bubbles and all these different views and opinions. AI is capable of navigating that complexity and giving us kind of content so tailored that it will increase the feeling of that bubble, increase the polarization of our society. That is a real concern for me. And it's going to be driven by, effectively, I think, brands. Brands will have the ability to target those groups effectively with scale using AI. So they will, because they want to outcompete their competitors. So this is a real challenge, I think, for society. This is going to be, I think, the next evolution of the conversations we have around filter bubbles, around social media feeds and algorithms, and how they impact society. It'll be through the use of conversational search and our own AI agents. That will be where that conversation migrates to. How do we make sure that those AI agents have our best interests at heart, not what we want to hear, but what we need to hear? This is something I think is going to become increasingly difficult for brands to navigate. Take a look at this. Everyone remembers the Bud Light controversy, right? One ill-informed engagement with a single influencer, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars of losses, and a lost market position, which they probably won't ever recover. So this is the result of that. This is the Bud Light sales in the this isn't just a polarized issue. This isn't a Democrat versus Republican or red versus blue. This is some analysis done by Harvard Business Review looking at the different impacts, and you can see that it doesn't matter if you're red or blue. The impact is there. Those losses, the blue line, is significantly below where it was in those previous years, and that's not an industry thing. That's a Bud Light thing. So tens of millions of dollars at least in losses for a company that misjudged its engagement on one of these kinds of issues, right? It misjudged a group of its audiences, their values, misjudged how they'd be perceived, and it's cost them big time. I think this is going to be where it gets really difficult for brands to navigate. Okay, how do we determine which of our audiences have which values? How do we take a side on a global topic? Like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for example, wasn't on anybody's risk list until it happened. And then every company in the world was faced with a decision, do we stay in Russia or not? And the decision to leave or to stay had multiple millions of impact either way, potentially. But they had to decide where their audience's values lied. So this is all going to come down to data, consumer research data, things this audience will know well. But this is becoming increasingly difficult. And it is not. And if you're thinking this is like a Gen Z thing, or this is like a younger audience thing, it's not. It may once have been. My own personal belief is that it may have been Gen Z that figured out they had the power through the use of social media, but every demographic group has figured out they have the power through social media. So some of these numbers here, like 55% of US online adults are willing to boycott a brand if that brand intentionally has unethical business practices. That's not 55% of Gen Z or millennials, 55% of all US online adults. That's a huge number. 22% of adult consumers would boycott a brand, does not share their values. That's a huge number. How do you identify their values? And when their values and their interests start to become increasingly small and niche in these kind of filter bubble effects, that becomes a really complex topic for large organizations to navigate, right? How do we please all of our audiences at the same time? We will not be able to. So deciding which audiences to stick with is going to become a mathematical or data-driven problem. So the future, where are we heading? As an industry, this is hopefully this is back to good stuff, right? What will we do less? Boolean, data tagging or coding, right? If anyone here has had the pleasure of having to look through hundreds of mentions to tag them or to code them in some kind of way, using your own brain to kind of try and find those trends, none of that. List building of journalists or outlets or influencers, creating graphs to get exactly that, the line going up at the right time, batting around for that for hours. Doom scrolling through huge numbers of tweets or huge numbers of mentions or Reddit posts or articles. All of that is going to be a lot less. And I think that is a good thing. I don't think anyone, I hope not everyone on this call is like, oh my God, I'm really going to miss dealing with Boolean. So what we'll be doing more of, right? I'm going back to that kind of case and acronym. Relationships, human relationships, empathy, genuinely novel creativity. And I'll come back to this at the end. And cultures of innovation, right? The bar or the gap between being able to imagine something being possible and it being technically possible is increasingly small. So creating a culture of innovation that rewards and encourages that kind of thought is something we will all need to be doing. And strategy, right? I kind of pick a survey of this industry and find people complaining about, I don't have enough time to think, I don't have enough time to strategize, I'm too busy doing. You're going to have the time to think until we get too efficient, and then it'll go away again. But we'll have an AI. So a key point here I want to bring out before I go into kind of the impact on junior and senior people in this industry is it's not about taking all the junior tasks. I get asked this question, like if I'm on stage and people ask questions almost every single time. Someone asks, do we need to hire as many young people if AI is sort of capable of doing a young person's job? Yes, you do. In fact, I'd encourage you to hire more. That's where I'm at in terms of looking at the level of tasks or the number of tasks that we automated by AI versus the ones that we carried out by humans. It is not about strategic and tactical or senior and junior. That's not the way it works. And that hopefully will become a bit more clear as I go through this. Cool. As new entrants, right? If you're about to graduate, you've just graduated, you're a couple of years into your career, what are things you should be doing? Yes, you should be building a deep familiarity with the tools. Believe it or not, at your point in your career, you have significantly more time and headspace to do this than someone 10, 20 kind of years your senior. They also, as you get older, I say this personally, it gets harder to learn new tools, right? It does, it gets harder. You've got to keep on that slippery slope, keep learning new tools, and do spend time understanding how it works. There's tons of really good, absolutely free learning out there on YouTube. Google has a ton of good courses. There's a couple of universities in the US that are doing good courses. Do understand how it works. You don't need to be able to build it, but you do need to understand roughly how it works in order to be able to get the most out of it, and also to learn its flaws. Do get good at using AI to do what you want. And I say like that, I don't want to say prompting. Prompting is a part of it. But really, what we're talking about here is setting good direction, right? If you're good at being explicit about what you want, you'll be good at using AI. You'll also be good at leading a team. So prompting is a part of it, but it really, if you think about it, it's just setting direction. And a little bit, it's just simple RAG, resource augmented generation. Be good at bringing data together to support the production of AI. I find that's kind of one of the simplest skills to learn. Knowing how to connect up like OpenAI or Gemini via a simple drag and drop interface. There's tools out here that allow you to do it, so you can connect to actual data to give you results. That really is a huge improvement in your ability to get value from the AI at scale. Don't, at your stage in your career, use AI to do your work. Use it to make your work better. And what I mean by that is if you rely on AI to always get you started to produce the outcome and you're editing its results as opposed to the other way around, you will not grow, you will not develop in the same way that your peers and those people also on the line, 20, 30 years your senior, had to develop their skill set, right? I'm old enough and bold enough to have had that blank page problem like 1,000 times, right? Client needs it, you've got the day, that's it, get going. That pressure, that's how we hone and develop our creative spark. We all have a God-given creative spark. We have to hone it and develop it and train it. The people here that haven't had AI the rest of their lives did that the hard way. If you skip out on that learning process, you will not be as good at judging the output of AI later on in your career. So use AI to make your work better. Don't just use it to do your work. What do you need for this? Resilience and willingness to learn. Continuing to learn, and being okay with not knowing everything, right? That's easier for you to do at your stage in your career because the expectations of you are less at this point in your career. No one expects you to be an absolute expert in all these things. So exploit your key differentiator, right? Ask questions, not necessarily about how the technology works, but how to judge right from wrong, good from bad, or rather good from great, which is the difference of AI. AI can do good, but it can't do absolutely great content, right? That's the bit where it's still struggling unless you give it a huge amount of context. That's the human part. Now, as experienced professionals, right, who on this call, like junior people come into the world of work are concerned there's not many jobs for them. Experienced officials have the same concern. They're going to be displaced by someone who knows how to use AI. And I'm here to tell you that is the case. I'm sorry. If you've been playing the head in the sand game, you do not have a choice. Start now. After this call, go get on ChatGPT, have some experimentation if you haven't already done that. If you're in a position of leading teams or kind of contributing to the culture of your business, do encourage a culture of innovation and experimentation. There's a guy, Greg Matusky, who runs an agency in the US. He was into generative AI well before generative AI was a thing. And so he's changed his business processes to the point where for every single new brief, new pitch, new issue, new task, one person in the team is kind of tagged as the AI guy, girl, to go and sit and play with ChatGPT and figure out, can we use AI to do something useful for this? This works. This is a great thing. And then to bring it back to the team and figure out, this is something we should do all the time. We should just make this part of our process. He does that every single time. And he's through that, he's got something like 90% penetration of AI across their processes, and it's like 60% of their processes. So get that experimentation going. You do need it. Do get good at getting AI to do what you want. So prompting, simple RAG, that's something everybody needs to do. And I think experienced professionals are in a different boat. You are fine to use AI to do your job. You already know what the difference is between great and good content. You're not being judged on that, right? You're being judged on how quickly you can get it there. So feel free to use AI. I think there's a stigma still, especially about inexperienced professionals, of using AI to do their job because they think it's cheating. It's not. It's doing it faster. It's no more cheating than when we were using emails to replace letters. Okay. That's not the same as when I'm encouraging junior people not to use it. It's because we want them to grow that skill set, right? That mindset. You already have that. So use it to be as fast as possible at doing what you do. In fact, use it to be as fast as possible at doing what you do best, and feel free to use it to do those things which by this point in your career, you're like, I'm never going to be good at numbers. It's just not my thing. That isn't something I'm ever going to be good at. Fine, use AI to do that. You're not going to change at this point in your career to all of a sudden be a maths whiz, right? So use AI to do what you do best, faster, and use it to do what you don't do that well a little bit better. Absolutely fine. There should be no stigma about the use of AI to get work done as fast and effectively as possible. So do not stop your teams or your company from experimenting because you're scared of it, right? You're going to lose them both. You'll lose the kids who want to use AI. I've done a bunch of kind of guest lectures at universities, and they want to use AI. I say that. Most recently, there's been a concern about the environmental impact of AI, which is an interesting cause for concern for young people not wanting to use AI. That's a new one, whole other topic. But for the most part, kids know the future is AI. They want AI on the CVs. They want the skills. They want to demonstrate they've used them. If you stop them from using, they're going to go somewhere where they will be able to use it, right? So don't stop them from experimenting and using it. Get the guidance in place. Give them the training. Enable them and support them for doing it. Because if you don't, you'll lose them and then you'll lose your business. What you need, resilient. This is the toughest one, right? This is the hardest one, especially for people old, kind of in the later years of their career. Or rather, maintaining your humility and being okay with not knowing the answers to the questions, right? AI is a brand new technology for a lot of us, and it's okay not to know everything. In fact, it's basically impossible to know everything about AI right now because it's moving so fast from so many different areas, so many different companies releasing new things all the time. I spend a lot of time, an embarrassing amount of time, trying to keep up. And I'm okay to admit I don't know half of it. It's impossible to keep up with the pace of change in AI right now. So be okay with that. Be okay with your ignorance. It's uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And then exploit your key differentiator, right? You know what really good looks like, right? So partnering, or if you can find a way to scale your teams where the people who know how best to get out of AI are partnered with people who know best what good content and what good plans and what good strategy looks like, that's the best you're going to get. So you know, and be comfortable with the fact you know what really good content looks like. And then, yeah, nearly there, 2 minutes. Last point, the atrophy of human creativity. This is a warning, kind of builds on those previous slides effectively. This was some research done on the propensity of words being used, or rather, basically AI's propensity to use certain words, and how that has risen since before large language models were a thing up until kind of Q1 of last year. You can see massive increases in some of these words, and you probably know it on this call if you've seen a lot of AI driven output without a lot of context and direction. The generic stuff it spits out reads like AI. And it's not just because we've subconsciously started to pick up on the use of these words. It's because the phrasing, the toning is all very based on the personality of the AI. Again, not based on the needs of the audience we're writing the content for. We have to give it that in context to improve the quality, right? So what does this mean? This means if you do rely on AI for generating a lot of your content, it's going to sound the same as everyone else's content if they're doing the same thing. So this is a real challenge, right? This is the arms race. Effectively, and I'll end on something slightly more inspirational, one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain, that effectively the difference between the right word and exactly the right word is the difference between the lightning bug and the lightning, right? AI is capable of that lightning bug. That's what it can do day in, day out. But we need the humans to give us the lightning. That's your job. Okay. Think that is it. I'll end on that. Yes, that is it. I'll end there. And I shall stop sharing and start looking in the chat. Q&A. Okay, got 12 minutes, plenty of time. I'm going to go randomly through these points. Apologies if I miss, because I've got the webinar chat, we've got the questions and answers. So I'm just going to go through these as I find them. Anonymous attendee, what about those organizations who only wanted to use AI in their comms function as part of a cost improvement plan? Are they wrong? Ooh, great question. My personal opinion, yes. I have an abundance mindset. I think AI should allow us to do a lot more with the same number of people. I think maybe because I come from startups and I'm always about kind of growth and taking market share. That's maybe how I see it. Are they wrong? There's obviously other parts of this, right? It depends on the nature of the company. If the company's in such a situation that they have to cut costs, yes, they could potentially use AI to try and do that. But that's not unique to communications. It's across the whole company. If they single out communications, that's wrong. But we can't ignore the fact that as we get efficiencies, what we could once have done with 10 people, we maybe now can do with 5. And what that means is that, yes, that company's team might be smaller, but it means another company who previously couldn't afford the team to achieve those outputs can now afford it because they can afford a team of 5. So this is the way. That's a very simplistic explanation for the way new technologies don't necessarily reduce jobs overall, even if individual companies downsize it, because effectively more companies can afford to do the same outputs. So are they wrong? My personal opinion, sure, we should be taking an abundance mindset with AI. Many big companies, this is from Andrew Webb. I probably shouldn't read out names in case people, I'm not sure if this is anonymous. Sorry, Andrew, if you didn't want your name reading out. Many big companies are being slow to adopt AI tools, even those embedded in existing systems like Copilot and Microsoft. What will it take for cautious companies to unlock the potential of AI? The death of other companies, I think. I think we're going to see increasingly the companies that figure out how to exploit the technology are going to start moving faster and outpacing their competitors. So it's going to come down to numbers at the end of the day. It always does, right? The pace of change is commensurate with the death of those companies that don't manage to adopt. You compare this to the situations we had when in kind of just after 2000, we had the internet, and companies either figured out how to become internet enabled or they died in some cases. The same with social media, the same with a lot of websites that were, we know our users are using desktop, we're going to optimize for that. This mobile thing is a fad, only to find the mobile became the most kind of common way for people to access the internet. So it took a while. Some of those companies figured out how to exploit it, and some of them didn't. Some of them aren't here anymore, right? I think the apprehension to adopt AI is that it doesn't have a narrative. Where did it come from and why? It needs this. What problem is it trying to solve? It needs a PR campaign. Yes, and it was, I think, when OpenAI had their struggles kind of a year and a half or so ago with Sam Altman kind of out and then back in, it was clear they didn't have a PR person talking to them or explain to them how to handle that. And now the PR people for each of those companies are effectively setting their own sort of narrative about things because they're differentiating from each other. But to your point, what that means is overall, it's very noisy, it's very messy. You're right, there isn't a single unifying narrative for AI, which would make it simple for people to digest if they've only got that limited bandwidth. We've got 100 companies telling us 100 different things. I completely agree with you. I don't know how to solve that problem. Can you recommend training courses for our skills and how we engage with AI software? Yeah, so Google has a set of free courses. I don't know how, but when we shared the recording of the webinar, I'll try and get in there some links. So Google has some free courses. There's a couple of universities, I'm going to say MIT, and another one in the US have free courses on how to do this. But YouTube, I think, is also a fantastic place. There are so many people talking about AI all over YouTube. There's a few that I follow. I'll try and find some links to that as well. The difference with learning how to use AI though versus any other technology, that it is very capable of teaching you itself how to use it. Yeah. So the very first prompt a lot of people get stuck in with ChatGPT is like, hey, this is my job, my industry, this is my company. Effectively, you're giving it context, right? You're telling it who you are, what you're about, what you do. How can I use you? What can you help me with? And go from there. Treat it like a coworker, treat it like a conversation. Don't treat it like a Google search box, right? Where you put a thing and you don't like the answer and you rewrite it. No, it's a conversation. Go from there. Will AI get better the more people use it? What about access, DEI, socioeconomic? Will it just repeat history as in the victor writes the story? Very interesting question. My own personal view is that if you compare it to the steam engine, right? So we, brilliant people in the UK, invented the steam engine and then hoarded that technology for many years. And it took, I think, just under 100 years for steam technology to fully proliferate around the entire world. And in that time, the UK, right, Britain, we'd used it to power our navies, we'd invaded half the planet. We used that technology to our own advantage, and we became the writers of history, right? Because we took over so much of the world. Now imagine if that steam engine had been made instantaneously available to everyone on the planet. How much different would the world look right now? I think drastically different, and probably, let's be honest, a little bit better. So I think it's a huge thing that all you need is the internet to be able to get to this. Yes, there's a cost involved, but there's still free versions. Like, it's far more accessible than most advanced technologies normally are. So I think it's a massive kind of level setter. I think it raises everyone up. I'm fascinated and super excited to find that countries that may not have been powerhouses economically previously could well be, if they lean into this harder, they lean into it faster. They will, if you take that kind of company competitive perspective to a socioeconomic or a geographic or a political level, then countries could be changing the way that we use technology. So yeah, I'm super excited about the idea that this is effectively a kind of a global leveler. Can we get the slides, please? Of course. Let's get down. Tanya, I think a lot of questions on it. Tanya, I feel like we should have a call. You a lot of questions. One thing that worries me is the black box effect of AI tools. As we get to the AI autopilot stage, how do you sanity check AI outputs, especially for things like audience analysis and measurement? A great question. Absolutely correct. The difference between the large language models that we might be using to automate these really advanced kind of AI autopilot or agentic experiences is that we don't really know the data they were trained on. And we can only do our best to try and kind of test them and evaluate their bias and understand what that bias is. And it is a weakness of large language models, of generative AI. Compared to old school, like data science driven natural language processing algorithms like a sentiment model, where we're very clear on the data we've used, which is where effectively the bias starts, right? The data sets you use and the processes we've used to clean and normalize that data, the process we use to train the model, to give it feedback. We can see all those parts of the process. So it's difficult because if you're using software that contains a sentiment model, you might not be able to see all of that, but the model provider can share with you the results, the F1 scores, right? The accuracy, the precision, recall, all these things we can share about how well the model works and how sometimes it struggles with certain contexts. We could be very clear about that, but we can't do that so much with a large language model. So what that means is that large languages aren't a silver bullet for be all and everything and do everything. They are a lot larger. They are therefore a lot slower and more expensive than some of these old school, like hardcore data science driven models. So we still need to use a mix. You need to use the right AI for the right task. And where we've got tasks that have a risk of bias or that where an action is going to be taken, we probably want to err on the side of knowing what was used to train that model and knowing how it works versus the black box of the LLM. But we also need to get better at explaining how the LLMs work and sharing the results of our tests and sharing our understanding of the biases and things like that. So it's a multi-pronged approach. We all need to do better. I'm going to look here at the webinar chat because I haven't looked at this one yet. Yes, the slides we shared. I think a lot of communications handling plan question and answer work could be enhanced with custom GPT designed to generate responses. I don't use this yet because I'm nervous about this generated AI slot. Yeah, I agree. A while away from employees encouraging these tools. Do I push for these tools right now? Yes, so I would say it is about the right time. And just kind of to summarize the question, can we rely on AI-driven outputs to automate simple or non-controversial tasks? So handling plans, questions, and answers. So, for example, you've got kind of, if you've got a newsroom and you've got people answering basic questions, like the question always comes, hey, can you share the images, blah. Can we trust AI to automate those kind of responses? I would say yes, if you have the right controls and procedures in place, because we've already been relying on those kinds of experiences for customer service and other aspects of what we do, right? The reason we call agentic AI agents is because it came out of the customer service agent sector, right? Those are the first kind of organizations to start trying to automate conversations between humans. The agents that were replaced gave the name that the agents now have. That's the reason that they're called that. So I would say yes, but you've got to have the right controls in place. You've got to make sure you have done your research, you know the kinds of users that are going to be engaging with you, because the worst case scenario is you have people coming in from a different kind of context you haven't planned for, and they get a terrible experience in talking to your chatbot, or they ask questions that you really want a human to deal with, and you haven't built in the controls to be able to identify that and take them out to a human workflow. So yes, it's possible. You've got to make sure you've got the right controls in place. And we have 1 minute left, which I think is just enough time for me to say thank you to everyone to join. I'll be following up the slides and the whatever I can in terms of links. And thank you to Preciana for introducing me, given no sound. And everyone, take a look at that Women in PR, the Missing Women in PR event coming up. I think that's it. I imagine Preciana will probably not come back because of sound problems. So I will say goodbye on behalf of the CIPR. You there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Ant. That was a great session. I managed to hear some of it, so that's good. And thanks, everybody. Yes, please follow us on LinkedIn for more information about our events.